My name is Susi Snyder, and I grew up in New York City and began my work on nuclear issues actually in Nevada. I currently work with a Dutch organization. It's called IKV Pax Christi, and it's the Interchurch Peace Council of the Netherlands and Pax Christi. So it's an ecumenical organization that roots itself in creating a peaceful, safer world. I was inspired to go to Nevada because I had heard about people who were working on nuclear issues, and specifically nuclear and indigenous rights issues. It was a very interesting grouping of people because we were connected and sort of led by a traditional leader of the indigenous nation where the Nevada test site is, the Western Shoshone Nation. And so his name is Corbin Harney. And Corbin would speak with clarity and passion about how his people were actually relocated from their sort of nomadic lifestyle and forced off the land to create the Nevada test site in the late 1940s and before the tests began there in 1951. And I was moved by that and moved by the injustice of it. And that inspired me to keep going. And through my experience, I've had the amazing ability to speak with survivors of nuclear weapons tests, as well as survivors from Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And their stories have changed the way I have looked at the issue of nuclear weapons. It is more than security, it is humanity. I don't think we'd be where we are today without NGOs. At the San Francisco conference, negotiating a UN charter, NGOs calling for recognition of their own participation and recognition of the broader scope of civil society. NGOs bring attention to these issues to the general public. We provide alternative analyses, and we afford opportunities for people to engage directly with governments and with decision makers to represent a point of view, whether it be a constituent point of view or the point of view of those who are directly affected. It's through the activity of NGOs that is possible. In the nuclear weapons field, the role of NGOs has been somewhat restricted, I think, when you compare it to human rights mechanisms. And I think that that's changing. And I think that the coming together of hundreds, if not thousands, of organizations calling for simple, direct messaging and a simple start, for example, for negotiations for a nuclear weapons-free world, that will make a difference. Without civil society activity, there's no way we'll get where we want to go. I personally do not believe that women are inherently more peaceful than men, but I have seen historically that women are much less represented in decision making. And you'll see the leaders in civil society are often women, whereas the leaders in government are often not. So both in promoting continued engagement within government, the rise of women to head of state position, to create a gender balance. These are very important things that women particularly can do. The other thing I think that is related to the gender question more specifically, a gendered analysis of security, the security paradigm, it rounds out a security analysis. It gets you looking at the way weapons are talked about, the way they are perceived in a community, and the way that you can shift a community to disarm, to, especially in post-conflict, to demobilize and to reintegrate. And that's necessary without a solid gender analysis and without sincere consideration for the gendered impact of policies. We wouldn't get there, and that's a very particular role, but it's not solely a women's role to do. Gender is everyone's responsibility. Often, not always, but often, men will take a very hard security look, whereas women will look at a more human security approach, which unfortunately sometimes is labeled soft security. However, a human security approach, how do you define security? We don't, in the nuclear field, we don't ask that question enough. That question is almost never answered by governments, how they actually define security. And I think if they ask their populations, it would be a much different reality than what we have now. I get sort of a hard feeling in the pit of my stomach when I hear governments call for the early entry into force of the CTBT. Early days have come and gone. This is a treaty that provides security and through the international monitoring system provides so many benefits to us globally that it's unthinkable that this core treaty has not yet entered into force. To get that to happen, we're still waiting for these 8 states to ratify. And I think that the national efforts within those states need to be amplified and reinforced by governments outside of those states. And I believe that a partnership between civil society actors who are calling for the ratification and governments who want to see this treaty enter into force, which I think are a majority, would be really helpful to make that happen. This treaty is necessary and it's achievable, and right now it's such a small step. We have so much more to do to create a secure world that ratification should just do it already. I hope that partnerships with especially key lobbying groups and governments who support the ratification can happen to facilitate the ratification in the outlier countries. I am terribly optimistic. I wouldn't be able to continue to do this if I wasn't. I truly feel that there are some creative new approaches. I really am inspired by looking at the humanitarian aspects of the use of nuclear weapons. I believe in my heart that the use of nuclear weapons is illegal, and that there's a general understanding of that. There have been so many wars since the bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki that have not used nuclear weapons. It is so wrong, and I think everyone understands that it is so wrong. There's a step we need to take, and I'm really hopeful that we'll take this step, and pretty soon, I think, where we'll have a groundswell, and governments will come together and start negotiating a comprehensive ban on the weapons. I think about how chemical weapons were banned, and it wasn't, okay, we have to disarm everything first and then ban them. It was make them illegal, set up a mechanism to effectively verify their dismantlement, their destruction, put some timelines in place, and then make it happen. And I believe that we can do that with nuclear weapons. And I think looking at the last 6 months, especially looking at governments in the Caribbean, Latin America, who have called for a high-level conference to start this negotiating process, looking at with excitement at Norway, who's now announced a conference on the humanitarian consequences of the use of nuclear weapons. I think we're getting there, and I expect to see nuclear weapons completely outlawed for everyone soon. I'm certainly going to work for it.